Hello, everybody, and welcome to my podcast, Multifamily Chronicles. Today, we're recording episode number 9, and my guest today is Melissa DeCicco. Melissa, hey, Melissa.
Hello.
Welcome to the show. Melissa is with SatisFacts and Apartment Ratings. Her role at Apartment Ratings and SatisFacts is Director of Client Performance. Welcome to the show, Melissa.
Thank you. So excited to be here and chat a little bit about what's going on in our industry.
Excellent. For the beginning, for starters, I would like for you to, kind of introduce yourself to the audience. I read your bio, it's very fascinating to me, and I'm sure that it's fascinating for our audience too. So why don't you just walk us through a little bit about your background and, what you're currently doing at SatisFacts and Apartment Ratings?
Sure. So I'm totally random, but I'm sort of classically trained in what they call industrial organizational psychology, which a lot of people are like, what on earth is that? So it's really fascinating. I highly encourage, if anyone's looking to do extra education, it's incredible, but it's really sort of the study of human behavior in the workplace specifically. So it's just really lent itself to opening a lot of avenues. So I've been in this industry for over 15 years. And I've been in a lot of different roles. So, human resources, marketing, training, all of the things I worked on site before. Leasing is my absolute favorite thing to do. So, I've loved every aspect of it. And I think sort of incorporating this study of human behavior has really made a difference in terms of, how I view the industry and how I, coach people and lead people in my current role with Apartment Ratings and SatisFacts. And I was a client for years of Apartment Ratings and SatisFacts, and I loved the product then. I love it now. It's one of those things, it's when I worked with them, I was like, oh my gosh, I would love to work for them someday. And then here you are. I actually, fulfilled something that I never thought was really possible, but I get to do that now.
So the human nature, I'm a student of human nature myself. Of course, I don't go to school for it, but I'm fascinated by it, and I try to understand it better every day. I think that there's a lot of value into just really understanding how people react to certain situations, so you could you could actually improve human relationships. In your experience, Melissa, how often do you see companies in general, whether it's your current company or or previous companies or your clients, how often do you see them that they're focusing on actually human behavior, and they actually start with their culture, with the organizational behavior, just by studying the human behavior, understanding it, and once they understand, to apply meaningful solutions to the issues that they have within the organization?
Yeah, so I think that's such a loaded question, because I think it's not just our industry, it's industry in general. When you have to deal with human behavior, there's not a lot of predictable data out there, right? It's different for every organization, it's different for every industry, it's different for every sort of department within organizations. It's so incredibly hard to deal with human behavior. And we see that every day when you lease apartments. Like, you don't know what people are going to do, right? It's not even just in the world of work, it's in the world of, leasing apartments as well. This human behavior aspect comes into play. And so no one is doing it, super well. I think, the opportunity I get at SatisFacts and Apartment Ratings, and I say this often, but it's my favorite part of the job, is that working at SatisFacts and Apartment Ratings, I get to hold a mirror up to remarkable people and organizations, and I get to help them see their potential and how they can actually impact the lives of people. And I mean that broadly, because it's not just their employees. If we do employee surveys for them, or if we do resident surveys, it's their employees that work for them, and it's also their residents. So it's not just one aspect of their organization. But I think what most organizations get wrong, and I've seen this recently with all the talk of like the Great Resignation and the Great Reshuffle, or however you want to categorize what we're experiencing right now, I think organizations have their they don't know what to do, right? So we all need to take a collective breath in the industry and take a step back, because we're throwing solutions. We're putting Band-Aids on all the things that are happening right now, instead of stepping back and saying, who are we as a company, and what is our strategy, not only in, how we're going to grow revenue, but what is our strategy related to people? And, asking the questions, through surveys and things like that, through us or through whoever, but asking those questions first, and then determining, how does that fit into our overall purpose as an organization? How do we make sure that we have a people strategy? And then once we do, instead of throwing things at, new days off or a flexible schedule or whatever it ends up being, find out what works for your organization first, and then start weaving that information into your recruiting, your retention, your leadership, your values, all of those things. So take a step back first, and then start to focus what works for your organization, because it's different, for every single company, every single property out there. And I think the next step that people falter at is that, so once we've got all this wonderful stuff, one, we don't talk about it, which doesn't help, right? So we need to promote it. We need to talk about it with our whoever works for us, and then start using those people to help with goal setting. Like, get everyone involved, not just the C-suite, not just the people at the corporate office, because that's where you get the disconnect. That's where that human behavior connection, it just falls apart, because you're not involving the right people in that goal setting conversation. And so find out, how can we all incorporate, how can we do this so that everyone who has a piece in this has a voice? And then once we start executing that, then we need to always, always, always ask for feedback. How are we doing? Are we living up to our values? Are we fulfilling the promise that we set for you? So I think, surveys is one way, but you can do it verbally too, just having conversations, increasing that communication, because if we don't follow that road, then you just start throwing perks at people that may not be meaningful, right? That was a really long answer to your question. I apologize.
There's just so many nuggets right there, in your answer, and I love it. I'm gonna start with just one, right? One of the things that you said, determine who you are, understand who you are, like who your company is, what your culture is, right? So when it comes to culture, Melissa, how important is like understanding what kind of culture you have and what kind of culture you want to have, right, in order to address the challenges that we have on a day-to-day. And I think the main challenge right now that everybody sees, it's that people are not happy at work and they're looking for opportunities. It's kind of like the floodgates were open and we don't have a way, we don't have that key to to turn them back, to close them back. It's like I've seen a couple of days ago a post on LinkedIn that was saying, hey, 4,600 recruiter jobs were added on LinkedIn today, in just one day. Someone posted. So I'm thinking to myself, right? Okay, we're adding thousands of jobs, so recruiters. So we're trying to bring people into the company, but then what do we do about the ones that are still here, right? And how do we treat them, and how do we manage to keep them in place, not just to keep them as numbers or as warm bodies, but as productive members of our organization, right? And how do we keep them motivated? How do we bring them back to where they're excited to come to work? They're excited to be part of something that's bigger than themselves. What's I know it's kind of a long rant, right, or a long question, but what's your take on this? Organizational culture, and then how do we determine what it is? How do we go about where we want to be heading, and then some practical solutions maybe.
Yeah, so there's so many things. I think one thing that a lot of companies get wrong too is you can't just determine or change your company culture, right? It just builds ground up. It's something that's fundamental to how you lead as a company, what your purpose is as an organization, and how you sort of kind of that, again, that strategy conversation that I just had. It's like, what is your purpose? Are you living it every day? And do your employees feel that when they're at work? And I think that that's where it starts. And as long as you have a really solid strategy in terms of what you want to be as a company and who you are, and then making sure that all of the things, like I said, it's not just related to people, but it's decisions that you make on your communities, decisions that you make financially, all of those things. Do those things line up with, are they aligned with what we say we do and who we are? So I think getting that right first is paramount, because you can try to change your culture, but if it's not happening at the highest level of the organization, it's not your real culture, right? So you've got to make sure that you're set up in that first. I think I've been reading so much about this stuff, but I actually read the folks that are staying back, so the folks that are not leaving their jobs, a good percentage, and I don't have that stat right in front of me, but there's a really good percentage of them that aren't just unsatisfied. They're fine with the status quo, but the problem is a lot of the people that are staying behind aren't just dissatisfied, they're actively disengaged, which is far worse than being just unsatisfied. They're the ones that are like a cancer on your culture, on everything that happens at your organization, because they're more likely to talk negatively, to do things that are counter to your values and your purpose as an organization. So getting that, like I said, getting that strategy and your people strategy right. And it's not just, I think too, we often say, it's not just HR's job, that's something that we have, it's everybody's job. And frankly, things that I've seen work really well is to have some really strong, so once you've determined your purpose and who you are as an organization and your values, and then make sure that your leaders understand how they play a part in that. So what is their role? What are the guidelines to be a leader at your organization? What does that mean to you in the C-suite? What does that mean all the way throughout your organization? What does it mean to be a leader? And then leaders, it's so hard to train leaders, but leaders need to be trained and how you as an organization handle different situations. And I think that there's no perfect answer to the question you asked, but I think that those are some really good first steps to really understand how can we make it so that, because, they always say, people don't leave organizations, they leave bosses, right? Bad bosses. So getting that level of your organization really tied into what you do, who you are, and live it every day. And they can be like your champions, right? They're the ones that are making sure that they're hiring the right way. So using those values, that purpose in your hiring process, because you want to make sure that the values of the people that come into your organization are aligned with who you are. So I think that those are some really easy first steps that are in the right direction, instead of, just add more PTO, whatever it is. I think that those are good steps that are foundational, that can make a big difference for organizations.
Yeah, so I'm picking up on a couple of things in your answer, right? And one of them is how the leaders are presenting, like how are they representing the culture? How do they walk the culture to the rest of the organization? And one of the things that I used to say about this is that, you cannot really outsource that. You cannot outsource culture or delegate. So in other words, if we're, the very top of the organization, right? We're the CEO, we're the president. It's not enough that we get in a room with other higher ups and we write some things that we're gonna put on the company website, right? They're all nice and pretty, right? We're about people. It's probably one of the most common, how everybody's about people. But it's also very funny, right? That everybody's about people, but everybody's looking for people. So that's kind of a paradox that should be. It's not really a paradox. It's just walking the talk. It's the piece that's that's kind of missing right there, and I think that's important, right? One, and then you can outsource and you can delegate You can't just say, hey, this is our culture. And then, for example, property management company, best example, because, we're talking about our industry, a CEO or a president or vice president, say, this is our vision. We're going to pass it on to the sites, and the managers are gonna be leaving and, passing on our culture. If you just kind of hand it over to them and, you expect for that to happen, I think it's kind of wishful thinking, right? Don't you?
Absolutely. And I think that sort of hiring for it, number one, is most important, because most of the time you can't really change people, right? So you want to make sure that you're hiring the right type of people for the culture that fits your purpose, so hiring is the first step, and then making sure that training, and it's not just, I don't mean that to be just regional managers or just your corporate office. That training needs to go all the way through. So even your leaders on the site level with your maintenance supervisors or maintenance managers, and also your property managers, making sure that they are in line with it too and understand it fully. I think that that's something where, we miss the boat. We just think they intuitively, they know what to do. They know what our culture is. And it's like, well, they may know, but it may not be what you think it is.
So true. Follow up and follow through, right? The execution piece, because we all know the great speeches, right? Everybody, provides, delivers great speeches, and then great speeches, if they're not really followed by action, they're just like some words that everybody's kind of forget about, right?
Right, and that's kind of what you and I were talking. That's sort of what happens oftentimes with our products, with SatisFacts. We have these amazing surveys, and we're giving you sort of a glimpse into where you have opportunities to really make a difference with employee or resident experience. And unfortunately, we don't often use that data, and so, our job, and my job as part of the education team, along with Leah Nicole Smith, which I'm sure many of you know who she is. She's incredible and brilliant. But she and I, sort of, that's our goal in life, is to make sure that our client partners are using that data and finding out, so we've collected it. So let's just not set it on a shelf somewhere. Let's figure out, like, where's our opportunities? And then, that's what we often preach, is getting aligned, your team specifically. So at the community level, getting your team aligned, understanding what your organism, your organization at the site level, what does that look like? And, how can we as a team sort of get aligned in the right direction and move it to where it needs to be to get that resident experience that we want? Because that's why we're all here, right? We love people and we want them to have the greatest experience where they live. And so, I think that that's one of the main things we preach, is we're going to help you understand your data. But then as a team, you guys have to take it and use it. And I think that that's kind of, organizations fill that same role too, right? So it's kind of the same concept when you think about it, because we're trying to have, it's like a little mini culture. It's like here's your culture at your community. But if you don't ask for feedback, because, you can ask for feedback when people come in and visit you, but, the SatisFacts surveys get kind of that passive resident voice, similar to how our employee surveys get that passive employee voice to come through, because oftentimes they won't say anything, but they have profound things to say that will make a difference in either your organization or your resident experience. So, using the tools that you have, are so important. And I am the biggest proponent of feedback. So ask for it all the time, because it only helps us improve.
It's excellent. And I was sharing before the show, I was sharing one of my, previous experiences, which I work for an organization that was using, SatisFacts to survey our residents and everything. And I realized soon after I started working for the organization that actually they were not put to good use. In other words, all that information, all the data, the individual surveys, the reports, they were coming in, but it wasn't really a plan in our organization at the time for us to look at the data and, see where are we missing the marks, what do we need to do to improve, right? So I basically just took upon myself that everything that was maintenance related at the time, I would actually be the one that received every single survey for the company. So at the time I had between 80 and 130 surveys every single week that I would receive, and I would read, and I would, ask questions. I would, give praise where praise was, due, and things went up. Things have improved. Like our numbers quarter to quarter improved. Now, can you think, Melissa, of and you don't have to really name names like which organization, but can you think of a situation or two where your clients really use this data, they put it to good use, and then they communicate it back to you, maybe ask for more feedback, like a success story, right? With an organization that like really embrace the SatisFacts surveys, and then they found solutions, they implement the solutions, they improve their numbers after the feedback received from your organization.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many stories like that. When we do performance reviews with our clients. Hopefully they all sign up for them, but we do performance reviews twice a year so that we can walk through your data, talk about it, help you make sense of it, and then help you to get those action plans and put those in place. But we often see, especially because I don't know if you're familiar with ApartmentRatings.com, but we have a program that's called Epic, and it is sort of we offer a letter grade based on the resident experience at your community, based on reviews, review count, things like that that come through ApartmentRatings.com. And we've seen, so we often couple that with our insight surveys. And so that's just a really good way to see, like, how is this making a difference? And there are people that if they do our performance review with us and then use our action planning templates, that they see a significant, which is usually over a point or at least a few tenths of a point improvement in a resident experience at their communities. And it doesn't seem like a lot, but on a 5-point scale, a tenth of a point is a huge difference. And that's when you can feel, like, that's when your residents can feel a difference, like something has changed at your community. Now, the sad part is if it goes down a tenth of a point, they also feel that. So you gotta be careful. But typically, if you're working with us in the education department and understanding your data and actually working with your teams, getting them aligned and moving in the right direction, you typically see that positive improvement in their resident experience. And I mean, I've used our surveys for so many different things. When I was on site, we used it for our capital improvements. We would use that feedback to see, what should we really invest in our properties, because this is what residents want. Because oftentimes we would say, oh, we can do this or this, what do we feel like doing, or what makes, but if we can add value for residents and find out what that would be for them. So we were using it for that. I mean, you can, our survey, they can be used however you want them in your organization. But, I think that it's feedback that we all need on so many levels. And then it's what we do with it. I think that it can make such a big difference. We just have to ask the questions.
Absolutely. One thing that I wanted to say to the audience is that when you say they moved 1 point up, when you rate on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 point means 20%. So when you move 1%, when you move 1 point, that means you improve by 20%. That's right. A huge improvement. Right. Or it could be the other way. You're 1 point down, and that's that's not a situation you want to be in, right? So Melissa, I want to go over maintenance surveys and the type of feedback that you're seeing from from the residents. And I will say, could you name the main issues overall? Like what are the main concerns, or where are we missing the mark the most as maintenance services as an industry? Again, I don't want on a specific client, but I'm sure that you're drilling into the numbers and you see the trends. I'll be super curious about what are the main concerns or the main issues, the main areas where we're missing the mark in maintenance.
Yeah, I mean, so maintenance typically gets pretty decent scores, right? People love the maintenance teams. They interact with them quite a bit. But the main things that we focus on in our surveys as it relates to maintenance, we often call the work order survey sort of our teamwork survey, because we all know that it takes everyone on the site to make sure work orders are completed efficiently and effectively. And so, the biggest thing that we see is an issue with follow-up with our maintenance. And again, it's not just maintenance teams, it's not just office teams. It's something where, we want to make sure we're getting it right the first time when we fix things. So that communication piece is so important. And then following up. So making sure, our techs may be amazing and they probably did fix it, but until the resident says it's fixed, we all know that it's not, right? Right. So
Correct.
using that
Absolutely.
follow-up piece, that's the thing we see most often with the work order. Residents want to be kept in the loop. They want to make sure that they understand what's going on if there's delays with their work order. So that communication piece, and then also, making sure that we're following up and making sure that those things are completed as we said they are. So those are some of the big things. There are some things that isn't necessarily with the work order survey, but like a move-in survey. A lot of what we see right now, the industry average is like 22% of people that move into their apartments, there's something broken in their apartment, which again, 22% doesn't seem that high, but that's a lot, right? That's that first impression that we're setting with our residents. And again, that's not maintenance specific necessarily either, because that's the job of everyone on site, but it is something that we see quite often that we need to follow up. We need to have those checklists, those kinds of things. Because 22% of people, there's something broken in their new home. So, those are some of the things that we kind of see, at least nationally.
Those are very large numbers. And the way I look at numbers like this, okay, when you're looking at 22%, imagine if we could get that down to 10%. How big, how enormous improvement we could make, let's say, as one single organization, if they were to just focus on that. And I just wanted to add one organization that I used to work with in the past. They created a policy where we would do walkthroughs with the residents present. It'll be a person from the office and a maintenance team member. We will do the walkthrough with the resident before they actually physically moved into the apartment. They will walk the apartment home, and then the resident, if they would find any type of issues at a time, they will point them out. The maintenance professional, the maintenance team member will make a list, and instead taking that list and put it in their file and file it, put it in a file cabinet, that list would go back to the maintenance shop, gather all the parts and supplies, and address all the issues on the spot, way before the resident belongings are entering the apartment. And I wanted to say that was very, very well received. I actually took that and used it in my in my other jobs after that particular company that I work for. So super powerful. Definitely an example of a company that's receptive, that understands where we're missing the mark. We're doing something to improve it, and then the results are showing. Right? How amazing is that? Right. Yeah.
Yeah, we often, the numbers are really high too for people that still have issues after move-in. So yeah, that kind of policy and that procedure would be perfect to try to sort of nip that in the bud, because that's like our bread and butter, right? The apartments, right? We've got to make sure we get that right. So that's something that makes a big difference for maintenance.
Of course. We touched a little bit because, we just kind of went through so much, right? We cover, but even though we cover so much, I feel like we barely scratched the surface, right, of what we wanted to cover for today. I wanted to ask you, Melissa, to wait on the Great Resignation. This whole, and you did mention during our conversation a little bit here and there, right? But this whole Great Resignation as a phenomenon, and with your background in understanding human nature, human behavior, and everything. I wanted to see your take of, okay, how did we get here? Like, how did we get to be in a situation of the Great Resignation? And where do we go from here as a, practical solutions to address this situation?
Yeah, I know. It's so sad, because I think as a society, we've sort of given this mantra of like, chase your dreams at the cost of everything, right? And we've sort of left behind ourselves and our mental health. And I think something that's really positive with the sort of younger millennial group is that they're prioritizing that mental health. And frankly, the pace that we're setting with productivity and how we're doing all this, it's not sustainable. It's just not. And I think that COVID, despite, I mean, everything is bad about COVID, everything except one thing. COVID gave the worker the opportunity and the space to say, I can do better. We can do better as a society, as organizations, as employers. We are putting our foot down and we're not going to take it anymore. We're not going to be overworked and we're not going to be underpaid, you know? And so I think that the only positive thing that COVID brought was that sort of opportunity to say, see, it can be done differently. So I think that that's what really made the space for that. But I think that, you know, there's, you know, I often talk about Barry Waymiller, which is a local company in St. Louis that he travels the world and talks about it, but he's been talking about the human revolution for years. And so really starting to prioritize people and their mental health, giving them, you know, people, they're going to prioritize now their mental health, their family, themselves, leisure, you know, all of those things are more important now. And organizations are going to have to adjust because you can't just sit with the status quo anymore. Like that's how we've always done it. It can always be different. You can always make adjustments. But I think it goes back to understanding your organization, what your people want, and then how do you make sure that that's what you're doing for your organization? Because it's not a one size fits all sort of approach. You know, so I think that that's something that we need to sort of wrestle with as employers or as leaders, however you want to sort of tackle that. But I mean, it's putting the respect back in. There's so many things, you know, in terms of like, if you're thinking through like your strategy and things like that, it's respecting those workers. It's really, you know, some of this is going to have to be individually tailored, you know, and that's up to your leaders to make that happen and find the right fit for people. But I think the ones that are unwilling to change or sort of adjust are the ones that are going to be left behind. And, you know, it's an opportunity for employers right now. You have an opportunity to do something different. You have an opportunity right now to really put people first, just like you say in your values. So how many of you are going to actually do that? And it's funny, I just so happened to come by it today. I don't know if you're a fan of like Mr. Rogers. You remember Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood? But I think, you know, he had a quote that I actually retweeted today, and it was, I'm going to probably butcher this, but it's something like, in stressful times, or I liken that to as a leader at any time, right? It's time for us to sort of start listening and opening our ears and our hearts and assure that not only are, you know, our solutions there, but the questions that we're asking are important as well. We have to make sure that we're asking the right questions. Don't just assume that you know what your people want, or don't just assume that you know the right direction. Make sure all of the people are involved. And I think that's sort of our goal. Mr. Rogers just gave us the answer, right? Is with keeping not only our ears open, but our hearts. I think that is key number one, and then asking questions just as good as the answers that we're providing.
I loved every single word of this answer. I truly do. I think, you know, I'm 100% in alignment with what you just stated. And I've been keep saying lately a lot, right? Very often, there really is time for us to put humans back in human resources.
Mm-hmm. Just not in human resources. Everyone put them back. You know, they're not assets. Like, yeah, you're right. It's like, God, people aren't here to work, and it's, you know, I think it's time. There was another. I wish I had that, but it was something where it's like, wouldn't it be great if we worked our lives around our actual lives, our work worked around our lives, and not our lives worked around work? I know that's not the best way to articulate that, but you know, I think it's time where now we focus on, here's our life, how does work sort of fit in, instead of this is my work, this is what I do, and then I'll fit in family time and all the things that are important to me on the weekends. I think that we're sort of entering a space where all of that's kind of going, it's all sort of colliding in a way that, it's going to change just how we work in general, as you said.
That's definitely a beautiful thing, because this whole COVID situation made people come to understanding that there's more to life than just work. They discover that they have families.
Yes.
Right. Once they got to spend so much time with them during the lockdowns and everything, they discovered that there's actually a beautiful thing to to have the ability, to have the possibility of spending like meaningful time with your family, and many other things. They've discovered that there's time for relaxation, where you basically disconnect from work and everything. So I think overall, just like you said, this is not a bad thing. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to do better as humans. It's an opportunity for companies to to do better, to just understand, like you said, understand what their employees want and just adjust and just can't meet those expectations, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I truly wish we could go on for a very long time. There'll be so much more to cover. I'm hoping that Melissa, you would accept to come back at a later time to continue our conversation. It's been great. But before we conclude the episode, I would like to give you the opportunity to just say something in closing that we didn't cover, just something that it's important to you. It's very important to you.
Oh my gosh, there's so many things, but I think the one thing I think that is just sort of the common thread through this whole thing, and I thought at this point we could say it's all over, right? The pandemic's over and we're getting back to normal, but we're not. And I think that in all that we do in business and life, I think that remembering kindness and lending a smile to someone who needs it. I don't mean to add another Dolly quote, but if you see someone without a smile, give them yours. And I think that that's just fundamental in terms of how we're going to get through this stuff together. I think that we're all here, for whatever purpose, personally that we have. So just making sure that you are worth it, and find an organization that links up to it and respects you and your time and your personal space, your work-life balance, because everyone deserves that. And I don't think we should accept less.
I couldn't think of a more wonderful way to close this conversation. Melissa, thank you so much for accepting my invitation. Thank you for being here. I'm hoping that you will come back to continue our conversation, because again, I feel like we just scratched the surface barely with with the many topics I would like to cover with you. It's been great having you on, and thank you everybody for watching. This is Multifamily Chronicles, episode number 9, and we had the pleasure to have today as a guest Melissa DeCicco.
Yes, thank you so much.